Well, at least the Minnesota Wild had a lead in this one. Unfortunately, they blow it as the Philadelphia Flyers win 4-3 in overtime. We got a lot to discuss in tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. We'll talk about the D rotation down the stretch, as well as Matt Boldy getting back on the score sheet. A lot to discuss in tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. Let's fire it up.
You are Locked On Wild Postcast, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another Locked On Wild postcast as the Minnesota Wild fall 4-3 in overtime. Tonight's Locked On Wild postcast is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. On tonight's Locked On Wild postcast, we will talk about everything that happens in yet another loss for the Minnesota Wild. We saw Matt Boldy get back on the score sheet. We just saw kind of just losing control of a game, which is an improvement over what we've seen over the last few games in which the Wild have never been in position to have control of the puck. And so a lot to get to here in tonight's postcast. But obviously, as all of you saw watching the action tonight, the Wild had a 3-1 lead. They got the first goal of the game, Marcus Johansson scoring on a nice little wrister from between the two face-off circles, and he's able to get it past Kata Hat, and Wild take a 1-0 lead. However, and okay, I'm going to do something that I haven't done. I don't even remember the last time. Can we give a little bit of a positive applause to John Merrill? Because we can definitively say John Merrill single-handedly stopped a 3-on-1 by himself. And honestly, it was like he went down into a slide, prevented Philadelphia from even getting a pass. And so as much as I tend to be critical, good play, Johnny vibes to prevent that 3-on-1. Now, you get the puck to the neutral zone and you cough it right back up. And so Merrill has to then try to defend a 2-on-1. He goes down into a crouch to try to prevent the shot or a pass. And honestly, a thread the needle type pass like that, if Merrill is tilted even a little bit, that pass doesn't get through and the Flyers don't score there. So I'm going to say props. I'm going to say props to Merrill for how he played both of those. I know the Flyers scored on the second one, but that was just a thread the needle type of pass. If that's played even a fraction differently, that's not a Flyers goal. So the Flyers tied up 1-1, but the Wild keep pushing. They keep pushing. Ryan Hartman scores on a nice one-timer that he's able to thread the needle on. There weren't many openings on Kata Hat throughout the course of this game, but Hartman able to find one to make it 2-1, and then Matt Boldy unleashes the slap shot from the far face-off circle to make it 3-1. Wild on top. Vibes are good. Everybody's having a good time. Hartman and Boldy are leading the way. They're having a great time. And then it was gone. The Flyers scored twice because the Wild just kind of completely took their foot off the gas. I was going to say they kind of did, but they did. Took their foot off the gas. The Flyers score twice, get it to OT. Joel Eriksson Ek, as John Hines said after the game, Joel Eriksson Ek was that should have been a clear-cut penalty on the Eriksson Ek breakaway, in which he wasn't able to get a shot off and the Flyers go down to the other end. They score, and that's the game. Minnesota Wild are now 1-6-1 in their last 8. But folks, the Minnesota Wild are in 6th in the Tankathon. And so let's look at all the things that we can take from this game that are good. I loved the fact that Matt Boldy was able to really get some power behind a shot and get one past Carter Hart on a great feed from Jake Middleton. Boldy has struggled with those one-timers this year. And so regardless of wanting to see this team stay in the top 10, there are still some things that we would like to see, and Matt Boldy's progress is one of them. The fact that he was able to just rifle that one in, great. I was hugely in favor of that, and that combination of him, Hartman, and Zuccarello, they had some juice. They had some life. They had some jolt to them. But as we have seen so often this season, there was really nobody else that did. I mean, I know Johansson scored, but beyond that, very quiet play from the rest of the lineup, and that's why you end up losing. But again, as we said, 6th in the Tankathon standings. If the Wild are able to continue this, maybe not necessarily by trying, but just by where they're at and how injured they are and how it's a team that has struggled even with the injuries. If they're able to manage this into a top 10 draft pick this season, they're going to get a player that they desperately need. So greater good is that the effort was there. The effort was lost down the stretch, and you end up losing the game. So honestly, I did not expect the Wild to win this game. I have had a hard time picking them in any of their most recent games. But the fact that we got a goal from Boldy on something that he struggled with this season is that's a positive to take from this game. That's a greater good thing to take from this game. And, you know, Hartman scoring 2, Hartman continuing to be somebody who has been productive in the lineup. You know, that's another good thing, because maybe if this hits critical mass at the end of this season and Craig Leopold demands that major changes are made, if Hartman has a season where he gets around the 25 to 30 goal mark this year, going into an extension in which he's signed for $4 million per, if Leopold insists that major changes be made, you could probably get something for that, if that is what is dictated to have to happen. I don't think it will be, because as we talked about in today's episode, I think the edict at the end of the season is going to be pretty clear that the injuries just sucked the life out of this team. And so they're going to wind it up and go back and give it another go next year. But we're getting kind of ahead of ourselves. I was very confused as to why you would throw such a heavy minutes workload on your top 4 defensemen on the front end of a back-to-back. Like, look at these minute combinations. Zach Bogosian played 22-38. Brock Faber played 28-49. Alex Goligoski played 21-27. Jake Middleton played 25-25. Dakota Mermis and John Merrill played right around 12 minutes apiece. And I would imagine, based on the fact that it was mentioned in the broadcast, I didn't see I didn't see it discussed. I would imagine that those two did not take a shift for quite a long time in the third period, which I get it. You're playing in a tight game. Things get tense, but like you're going to have some dog-tired defensemen in tomorrow's game against the Arizona Coyotes. And I know there is a lot of frustration as to why Damon Hunt hasn't played hardly at all. And honestly, folks, I was thinking about this throughout the day today and have been thinking about this for a while. It's pretty clear that for what we've seen Hunt be able to do in the lineup, it's pretty clear that the coaching staff just does not view him as a regular NHL defenseman at this point. And whether or not they are able to, whether or not he's able to get there, hopefully he does. But that's about the only thing that I can think of as to why Hunt is not in the lineup hardly at all. Just continues to be that seventh defenseman, is that they view him as able to play in emergencies, but just not able to, at this point, be a consistent contributor on that blue line, which I don't agree with that, but that's I think where we're at with that. But I will tell you that relying on four defensemen in the first game of a back-to-back, I don't know why you would do that. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the whole game. Is, again, there were some things that happened that were positives from this game, but the greater good was served by it being an overtime loss. Again, I just want to continue to see development from the young guys on this team. And so Boldy, check mark. I thought Rossi had some good moments. So it's a loss. Again, if you are hoping that this team pushes for a postseason spot, this loss will infuriate you. But greater good, it's just another one to add to the list. But I'm real curious. I see we've got a very active comment section here tonight, and so I'm just going to stop. I'm going to stop shooting from my hip, and we're going to get to all the comments here because I saw some discussion on the Eriksson Ek penalty. And a few other things. So we'll get to the comments. We'll continue to roll into tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. All of that coming up as we continue the action. Minnesota Wild fall 4-3 in overtime to the Philadelphia Flyers. More of our Locked On Wild postcast on the way after this. Tonight's Locked On Wild postcast is brought to you by Sleeper. We have hit the midpoint of the NHL season right on the button. Minnesota Wild are out of the postseason picture, and it seems more and more likely that they won't be able to make it into the playoffs this season. But that doesn't mean that you can't win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether your favorite players, such as Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson Ek, Marco Rossi, go over or under, more or less, than their predictions in categories such as goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. So if you picked tonight Matt Boldy, Ryan Hartman, Matt Zuccarello, Joel Eriksson Ek, you probably did just fine with your Sleeper lineup. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Minnesota Wild lose by a score of 4-3 in OT tonight to the Philadelphia Flyers. They do pick up a point, but they do not pick up a win. And as we talked about in the Tankathon, Minnesota Wild are in 6th in the Tankathon standings. So, summation of everything that we saw here in this one, it's time to get to the comments, because as much as I can take up the first part of these postcasts, just throwing my 2 cents out there, honestly, really, really always enjoy hearing from the listeners in these postcasts. So let's get right to it here in this one tonight. We'll start with Bob. And Bob has been A+ on the nicknames all season. Freddie Evison was out there for almost every Flyers goal. He's seriously looking like a bad investment. Bogosian is lethal on our end. Cough, 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 choke. Yeah, we talked about this with my absolute meltdown in the Dallas game. Like, I have more of an issue. I have more of an issue with the Freddie Gaudreau contract at this point than I do. So let's just rank them. Let's just rank the extensions as to which ones I have the biggest problems with. So we're going to start at the bottom. Matt Zuccarello, 2-year deal, took a pay cut. I really don't, considering that he has been just about a point per game guy this year. I really don't have a ton of problem with that, the way it's played out. Ryan Hartman is next. Hartman at least is producing. Yes, at times the penalties get out of control, but he at least is producing. So Zuccarello is bottom. Hartman is next. I would say Foligno is third. And Foligno tonight, I know there were people asking as to where he was at. Foligno played 15 minutes tonight. He had 4 hits, had a takeaway. He had 1 shot and was a -2 on the night. He played 2 seconds of power play time, 48 seconds of penalty kill time. And, I will say that Foligno had some moments tonight. He had some moments where he made some nice plays. He had some physicality that he threw around. But it just does seem like the games in which you look at what he's doing and you say, okay, Foligno's having one of those games, it just seems like those are pretty spread out. And so I will put Foligno number 2. Freddie Gaudreau for me is number 1 in terms of the contracts that I have the biggest problem with. Gaudreau tonight, 12 minutes in a game in which you went to overtime. He had 2 shots, 1 hit, 2 takeaways, was a -1 on the night. And look, I'm going to give him a pass for the first part of the season. That injury in which he sustained against Ryan Reeves in the Toronto game robbed him of just a ton of what it robbed him basically of his entire shot. But up until that Toronto game, it was the first Toronto game in which he got hurt. So yeah, that would explain the lack of production through the first handful of games of the season. But like, you look at the numbers in general, he's got 3 goals, 6 assists on the season, and is just he's a guy who I think was more known for his defense than he was for his offense. And he's a -9 on the season. And with what we've seen Bill Guerin be able to do in terms of acquiring bottom 6 centers, I don't know that there was a need to try to lock in a guy who probably peaked offensively last year. Honestly, what I probably would have tried to do if I were being the practical GM that I play sometimes on this show is try to flip Gaudreau off of a season in which he scored 19 goals. Try to flip that for some sort of an asset, because results aside, let's recall some of the names that have graced this team. Remember Nick Bonino? He was a bottom six center. He was a penalty kill guy, face-off specialist. You can find guys like that you can bring in to play a bottom six role and be a defense-oriented center that can play on the penalty kill and can win you some face-offs. Like, you can find those guys and you can have that be kind of the part of the roster that is turned over until you maybe find a rookie that can step in and take that spot to where you don't need to go find somebody. But you lock in for 5 years, and I don't really have any problem with the AAV. I really don't, because as the salary cap goes up, that's just going to be the going rate for bottom six players. So I really don't have any problem with the AAV. I do have a problem with the term. I do have a problem with the 5 years of the term. So if we're talking about these 4 extensions, the Freddie Gaudreau one is probably the one that I have the most problem with. So that's his play needs to be better. And the fact that line, that third line that you've put together, just really is not a threat to score at all. That's kind of a concern. Even when you had the Grief line at the height of their powers, you could still count on Foligno and Eriksson Ek and Greenway to chip in some goals, but that third line, it is almost non-existent to what they're able to do. So that's my Freddie soapbox for tonight. Can't wait to catch up to the comment section to see what people think about that. Minnesota Mary joining us tonight. Too bad Flower didn't get a win. Still waiting for 552. I would like to get 552 out of the way. That is one win that I am really looking forward to this season, because again, that was supposed to be kind of a fun part of the season. And now that this whole thing is derailed, 552 is like going to be one of the sole sources of joy outside of the young player development that continues to happen for this team in the Faber and Rossi department. I would hope that happens. It's not going to happen tomorrow night because Fleury's not going to start. It could be Philip Gustafsson tomorrow night, or it could be Jesper Wallstedt again. I guess we'll find out in the morning. So we will do an episode for you, but I'm going to wait until we hear what happens at morning skate, see who is potentially in and who's not, and then we'll react to that too. But I want to see Fleury get 552. But until some of the other pieces of the roster come back, I think you're either going to see 2 outcomes with these games. You're going to see either you fall behind early and you don't have the horses to be able to catch up to tie, or you get out to a lead and you're hanging on for dear life. Those are really the two. It's a roster that doesn't have the horses right now to be able to blow people out. And it's a roster that, when going up against the better teams in the NHL, is not going to be able to match up. But again, greater good. So I hope it happens. I mean, honestly, if you look at what the Wild have coming up here over their schedule, you've got Coyotes tomorrow night. Then on Monday, you have the Islanders at home. And then after that, you go Tampa, Florida, Carolina. And then you've got those 3 home games to finish off the pre-All-Star break with Washington, Nashville, Anaheim. So I don't have a ton of faith in what is going to happen on the road. especially. So maybe it happens on Monday against New York. If not there, then you hope against Washington or probably against Anaheim are your two most likely opportunities for that to happen. So we'll see where that milestone does end up getting achieved. I sing too much joining us. You know what? I'm choosing to be positive. We played better, even had a lead, and didn't play entirely like crap for 59 minutes of the game. That's the thing. Like that was encouraging that the battle level was better tonight. I think the team responded to everybody that covers them, just ripping them to shreds. It seemed like they certainly had some more urgency in this one today, but again, you have those final few minutes in which they just kind of let their foot off the gas, and credit to that Philadelphia team. Not a ton of people expected them to be as good as they have been this season. They don't score a ton of goals, but John Tortorella gets a lot out of that team. He's a coach, I think, that commands effort, commands guys to be engaged throughout the game. And so I'm not surprised in the slightest that they just kept pushing, just kept battling. They found an opportunity in the third period, and they were able to come away with the win because he's a good coach. I know he is known way more for his sound bites than he is what he does on the ice, but he's a good coach. It's a good young team that Philadelphia has, and that's another team. You look at some of those pieces that, and they still need a good amount to be like a legit contender. But you look at some of those young pieces that they have on that team, and it's hard not to be envious of that. I mean, good Lord, Jamie Drysdale can fly. Pun probably not intended, but probably also intended. Jamie Drysdale can fly. And so that was a nice, savvy pickup for the Flyers to get a guy like that. Maybe the Wild could do a couple of trades like that to try to get some youth and some speed into this mix. I would be certainly all in favor of that because I think he's going to be a great player. And it just seemed like the Ducks kind of that was one with all the young talent that they have that they just were willing to move on and try to get a little younger. And they did with Cutter Gauthier. So it's kind of a fun Flyers mix. And I don't know. It just isn't really as much of a surprise that the Wilds let their foot off the gas. Steve, piggybacking off of that point, why every time we score do we play sloppy afterwards? Isn't it funny just how just like clockwork, you can almost work it in that when the Wild score like a meaningful goal, like they rally back to tie and they're celebrating out on the ice, that you ease up on that attack for even a second, and a team is able to just seize momentum. And you kind of take your eye off the prize. I think that speaks to how few and far in between some of these good vibe moments have been for the Wild this season, is that they truly are trying to kind of hang on to them a little too long. And you go up against these teams that have not been stuck in purgatory for most of the year. They have had plenty of games in which they've been able to come away with wins. And so while the Wild are kind of trying to soak in those good moments, the other team just keeps pushing, and it takes the Wild a little while to get back to the task at hand. I don't know, because it seems like it happens just very, very frequently. And so, yeah, just not good. Keith joining us tonight. We desperately need our injured D back. I'm pretty sure if Kirill Kaprizov was in the overtime, we would have won. Yeah, I think you look at some of those players that are out of the lineup, that feels like one that the Wild would have been able to win. I figured it was going to a shootout because That just seems like the most likely combination for this team. But, again, greater good. They got it to OT, but they didn't win. And here are the Tankathon standings right now. San Jose still has a mammoth lead. They have just 23 points in 42 games. Chicago is close behind with 26. Anaheim then has 29. Ottawa has 28, but again, keep in mind that the Senators have played only 37 games this season somehow. So they're in fourth. Columbus is in fifth with 35, and the Minnesota Wild are in sixth with 39. They're 1 point clear of Buffalo and Montreal. And so I've got the Tankathon up. Let me just run one sim and see where we end up. And, of course, the Wild dropped to seventh. Buffalo hopped all the way up for the number one overall pick, and Chicago just stays at second, just like we expected. So, again, I just would really like to be able to come away with an impact top 10 prospect this season. We look at what we've had 4 top 10 draft picks over the last couple of years. Was Matt Boldy was a top 10, wasn't he? Or was he 12? Well, anyway, in that range, you got Boldy and you got Rossi. So you get somebody else in that range, odds of them hitting are much better. Now, it's not a guarantee that they're going to, but with as much success as we've seen Judd Brackett have drafting in the 20s, really would love to give him the opportunity to draft in the 10s or in the single digits and see what he's able to come up with for impact talent for this team. Because yes, they did draft Charlie Stramel with their first round pick this past year, which was another notorious head scratch moment for me in recapping the draft. But then they got Riley Heidt, who looks like an absolute stud in the second. So Judd Brackett's got some draftability to him as draft guru for this team, and giving him a high pick is a good idea. Let's go back to Keith on the line combinations. What did you think of the new line combinations? I thought the top line did a good job of carrying, as we've talked about. That top line needs to do they need to do the heavy lifting, regardless of who they're playing, who else is in the lineup and who isn't. But beyond that, I mean, there were some moments for each of the other lines, but just not enough consistently to get you a win. And so Boldy, Hartman, Zuccarello doing the heavy lifting is what you expect. So glad that they were able to do it, but you got to have other guys. Credit to Marcus Johansson for scoring tonight. He stepped up to help out, but beyond that, you had too many guys that just were not able to contribute. So just not good, but it is good. It's good for us. Just not for those that are still expecting this team to push into the postseason. Dan Bradley joining us. Anton Silalyev, definitely did not pronounce that right. A 6'7" defenseman who can skate and bring some offense. Okay. I would be highly in favor of that, because I honestly, as much as we would like to continue to add some skill offensively to this mix, I would be perfectly fine with drafting somebody on defense that can be a major impact guy, because you're going to have some holes, and Jonas Brodin and Jared Spurgeon aren't going to play forever, and it seems like every season they play less and less. So getting somebody that can step in to help, I'm highly in favor of that. Minnesota Mary, Faber has not been quite as sharp as usual, probably tired from too many 30-minute games. And also, I think had been mentioned earlier, it was Amanda that mentioned it. He was ill tonight. So that can explain a little bit as to why he may not look as Fabery as he typically does. But then even still, that is a question on my behalf. Is if you know he's not feeling good, why are you cutting it down to 4 defensemen at the end of the game? I will never get that, but what can you do? Jeremy joining us from the Iowa-Minnesota border. My trip for my first NHL game has been hell and a half. Drive safely. I'm headed to the X tomorrow. Have been watching the weather reports extensively, but it doesn't look like we've had much here. So I'm hopefully going to be good to go. Just going to have to keep an eye on those wind chills, because I'm not a huge fan of the 60 below nonsense. So not a fan of that. Jason joining us. Horrible turnovers are the death of us this year. Horrible turnovers, injuries, and guys just getting olayed on defense. Like, that's the trifecta. If you wanted to find a fourth to put on the Mount Rushmore, slap the special teams on there for the fourth bit of the Mount Rushmore, because outside of that first power play, which I thought looked really, really good, it just was a couple of Kata Hot. I know it's Carter Hart, but I like pronouncing it like I'm an East Coaster. A save for a few Kata Hot saves in that first power play, you could really do much more to score. The Wild didn't, of course. And then the rest of the game, the special teams was not special. You take a too many men on the ice penalty to negate one of your power plays. You give up a delayed. Can we talk about the Ryan Hartman hooking penalty? Did anybody else think that Hartman actually hooked himself? It looked to me like he accidentally hooked himself and they called the penalty. I was a little confused with that one. Thankfully, Philly didn't score, but I don't know. That was weird, but let's go to some of the other talk here. The Goudreau talk is useless. He can be moved to one of 17 teams. Then move him. I don't know. Like, somebody point to me in the comments, as now I get caught up. What is he bringing you? Like, tell me what Freddie Gaudreau is bringing you that you can't replace in the lineup. I'll hold. I'll wait. Yeah, that's what I thought. I don't know. I just feel like you're getting just the guy minutes. So I would rather just put that roster spot, give that to somebody else. But that's just me. He's known for shootouts. Yes, he is known for shootouts. But beyond that, you don't need to accumulate those shootout points this year. You can find other people for that. Beyond that, are Wild fans spinning the lottery wheel already? This isn't going to be, I don't get the sense that this is a team that is going to make the postseason. So what else is there to do? No, we're not trading Matt Boldy. Like we're not going down. We're starting to derail here. We're not going down the Boldy trade route. So we can just stop with that. Denny, I am hoping to hear back on a couple of things for potential super show. I'll keep you posted on that. Just have to hear back for a couple of things in regards to the super show. Beyond that tonight, just scanning through to see if there's anything else that, how do you expect to do well with $14 million in dead cap? Most playoff teams are maxed out to the cap. I don't think anybody expected that this was going to be a legit contender for the goal for this team, even with the dead cap, that comes from up top. The expectation that this is going to be a postseason bound team, that's not something that we're throwing on them. That's something that's being brought from the owner and the GM. The expectations are that this is going to be a team that's going to go to the postseason. And I think realistically, we figure that it's going to be incredibly hard for this team to be competitive over the next two seasons. And so when the injuries mount, when the losses mount, I've been calling for probably at least a week or two that you just write this off as a bad season. You're not going to be able to be a legit postseason contender until you get that dead cap money back. And so the big goal for these two seasons is to evaluate what you have. When the postseason is not the attainable thing, you evaluate what you've got, see if you can find anybody viable to fill spots on the roster, and you go on to the next season. Still a half season to go. Think St. Louis going from bottom of the league. St. Louis did not have $14 million in dead cap. If the Wild do make the postseason, we'll cheer for them. But I'm just trying to be realistic. I don't think postseason's in the cards this year. If I'm wrong, Dell, I will personally apologize to you for being wrong if the Wild do make the postseason. But if not, we're on to draft talk. We're on to offseason talk. We're on to what does this roster look like next year in the final year of this cap mess. I think, have enough of a realistic approach to this to know that these are not this is not the cup run. So find some pieces in these next 2 years that will allow you, find some pieces that you can develop to add to the mix. Like the big highlights from this season are going to be the development of Faber and Rossi. those are guys that you can add to the mix and can build around. Next season, it'll be finding a couple of guys that you can do that same thing with. And then when the money comes back, you go plug holes. You go find guys that you can add to the mix, and you just continue to build uphill. That's all. That's all there is. Sick of the dead cap talk. I would much rather focus on the greater good myself, but I don't know. Fan means being fanatical. Don't give up. Del, are you a Jets fan? Must be. I don't know. Yeah, I would like to see competitive hockey if it leads to wins, but I don't want to see repeats of lifelessness. That's all I ask. Do you think Boldy will play like he cares about more than empty stats and goals? I mean, I hope so, because he's a huge part of the mix for this team. He's signed to a long-term 7x7. I know. I think we've seen enough from Boldy to know that he is a little bit streaky as a scorer, but if you can get him to impact the game in other ways, that's then where you are more able to deal with it. And he's got, I think it's 14 goals in the last 22 games. And that's a nice stretch for Boldy. That's why I want to trade him. The body language from his teammates tells me he's annoying them with him going through the motions. I think there are way more. I don't think it's just a Matt Boldy problem going through the motions. Like, there are plenty of other guys that give off that same level of not really being into a game. And let's keep this in mind with Boldy too. Boldy is still in his first couple of seasons in the NHL. And so he's still growing and learning as an NHLer. And like, I would be more worried about the veteran guys that seem like they've kind of checked out than a young player getting frustrated by not consistently scoring. But that's just me. I would be more worried about veteran players that get comfortable and go through long periods of quiet than I would a 22-year-old. I can bet you with all those weird rumblings about Joel Eriksson Ek and Vancouver, I could just about bet you that if there's a hierarchy of players that are untradeable at this point, Brock Faber's probably at the top of the list. Then it's some combination of Joel Eriksson Ek and Matt Boldy. You're just not trading those guys. Respectfully, it's not going to happen. John clearly saw my tweets from a couple of weeks ago when he says to send Boldy to the PGA, something that he seems infinitely more passionate about. I'm not going to do the PGA rant because I don't need to burst blood vessels in my skull again. So I think what we will do is, like I said, tomorrow, I'm going to wait and see what happens at morning skate, see if we get a sense as to if any of these injured guys are coming back. We'll get you an episode to gear up for tomorrow night's game against the Arizona Coyotes and the Matt Dumba homecoming. And I get the veterans could be checked out, but Boldy is here on a big long-term investment. You got to bank on him fulfilling his contract. If you can break even on it, maybe it's wise. No, it's not. The reason that the Minnesota Wild signed Matt Boldy to the extension that they did right now is because they're banking on, in the final 4 years of that deal, they're banking on him being worth substantially more than $7 million per season. And so on the front end of this contract, it's probably going to be that he is slightly below value there, with the hopes that then he plays like a $8 or a $9 million player when he gets closer to his prime. That is not something that you just trade away. That's about all I got on that. You're not going to trade Matt Boldy. You're just not. All right. That's what I got for you tonight. We'll see what happens at morning skates, and we'll get you geared up for tomorrow night's game against the Arizona Coyotes. If you think that postseason is in the cards for this team, this is a must-win game. Every game the rest of the way is a must-win game, and so it's a key game for the postseason crowd. Arizona's a fun team. And so if we get a fun hockey game that the Wilds end up coming up on the wrong end of, greater good continues to be served. So thanks, folks, for hanging out here tonight. Appreciate all the comments as always. And we'll do this again for tomorrow night's game against the Arizona Coyotes. So make sure to like this video before you head out for the night. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Wild if you have not already. And we will continue to guide you through, hopefully, plenty of greater good moments throughout the rest of the season. And you can find new episodes of Locked On Wild every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.